tonight's webinar about using a duck call and decoy strategies. So this webinar is about ducks specifically. We're not really going into geese for this one. We do have other webinars that talk about that, and maybe we'll still do another goose webinar later this year, but this one, ducks specifically. So first off, I want to give thanks to Ryan Askren. Most of this, I think all of the duck photos that we used in this presentation are his. So he has some absolutely amazingly stunning waterfowl photos like this drake widgeon right here on the cover. Thanks to Ryan Askren for sharing those duck photos with us. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Once my computer knows that we're going, now we're cooking. Duck calls. Okay, first off, I want to clear this right away. Like, the number one thing when it comes to waterfowl hunting is location. No doubt about that. The number two thing is hiding from them very well. Waterfowl hunters call this the hide. These two things are by far the most important things. So we're going to be talking about duck calls and decoy placement strategies today. These things can certainly help you, but they do not make up for number one and number two. If you're not where the ducks want to be, no amount of decoys, and you could be the best caller in the world, is going to likely change their mind. Same thing with if you're not hidden well. And this is especially for big ducks like mallards that are known to circle a dozen times before they commit. If they see one thing that they don't like, guess what? It's a game over. Now with species like teal and all that, it may not be quite as important, but with mallards, it's paramount, the hide. If you're not hidden well, you might be in the best spot in the world, you might be a great caller, and you might have the perfect decoy spread, but you're probably going to have a poor hunt. And I really like to emphasize this by talking about when I started waterfowl hunting in my college years. Putting out decoys is fun, right? So we would show up a lot of times maybe an hour and a half before shooting time. Plenty of time, right? And we would spend an hour putting out a decoy spread, and then about 30 minutes of that kind of perfecting our hide, moving some brush around, making it where we could blend in. And as I went, that completely shifted. So if I was there an hour and a half before shooting time, guess what? I'm spending an hour working on the hide, and I'm pitching out my decoys in 15 or 20 minutes, because that's how important it is to be hidden. Very important, paramount, absolutely. But that being said, calling and decoys can certainly help you. First off, let's talk about the basic types of duck calls. And, we could break these down further, but for this purpose of this webinar, we're going to just break it down into your basic wooden duck call, and then your acrylic or different plastic. A lot of times they're different types of polybicarbonate and stuff like that, duck calls, and then your whistles. These can be your species specific. Some companies will sell specific, like wood duck, pintail, widgeon whistles, and then some of them will have these like 6-in-1 whistles that kind of do all the sounds a little bit, but doesn't do any of them perfectly. So a couple different options on those. With the whistles, those calls are really good just as kind of a backup call. Have it something to switch to when the ducks are close, or a really great call to give to somebody who's hunting with you that's new, maybe doesn't know how to blow a traditional duck call. These whistles are really hard to mess up, so you can give a new hunter one of these whistles and they get to do some calling too, feel like they're kind of a part of that, but really without any way to mess up your hunt, which is good. Now when it comes to your standard duck calls, why would you choose wood or acrylic, vice versa? In general, your wood calls kind of sound sweeter, more ducky, but they have less volume. They're also more prone to sticking because the wood has a tendency to shrink and swell when it gets cold or hot, or when you're blowing in it, putting a lot of moisture into the call. Those wooden calls tend to stick up pretty bad. Acrylic duck calls are a little bit more weatherproof. They're also louder. They cut through wind and any type of weather a little bit better than a wooden duck call. But they can also be so loud that you can blow ducks out when they are close. So like everything, pluses and minuses with all of these different types of calls. So getting started. I'll go ahead and grab my calls here. Now, getting started, first off, what I like to tell people is grab your duck call and don't even think about it as a duck call. I say the same thing with turkey calls or everything. When you're first off grabbing a call, just pretend like you're a kid being handed a kazoo, right? And you just want to play with this new toy and figure out the range of sounds that it can make. So a duck call, and we'll get to a little, or in that last, let me go back. There's two pieces to a duck call. The big piece that you actually blow into is called the barrel, and the small piece that actually holds your reed and your wedge and your toning board is called the insert. So when you're first putting that call up to your mouth, you're going to be holding the call in your hand at the insert. And you're going to be putting that barrel up to your lips, just like if it was a bottle of soda or whatever your favorite beverage is to drink out of a bottle. That's the same way that you put a duck call up to your lips, like it was a bottle and you're trying to take a drink from it. And so that's the barrel. The insert, you could twist that and pull that out, and you can see an exposed reed in there. If you ever have to adjust your call, you can just move that reed in or out. In general, if you move the reed in, making it shorter, that's going to make the reed tighter, a little bit more higher pitched, or vice versa. If you move it out, it'll make it looser, a little bit more lower pitched. A lot of these calls, when you buy them, they're going to come kind of pre-tuned. Somebody will tune them at the factory, so they should be pretty close to on tune when you get them. Now, go ahead and take that barrel, put it up to your lips, and just kind of experiment with the call and get a range of noises that these calls can make. And I'll just kind of give you an example of what that might sound like. Just go crazy on that thing. Get a feel for all of its range before you even start to try to think about sounding like a duck. That's going to help you kind of become one with your instrument, so to speak, and kind of cut down the things that you're trying to think about. Because what I find is a lot of people who are trying to learn how to call anything, whether that's turkeys, ducks, geese, whatever it is, your biggest problem is thinking too much from the beginning. They're like, okay, I got to hold the call like this. I've got to blow the air like this. I've got to hold my tongue like this, and then I've got to drop it. I've got to do all this stuff. Like, forget about all that stuff, you know. It's a lot easier if you just don't think. It's like throwing a baseball. Just look at where you want to go and throw it. Same thing with these calls. If you start out this way, just put it to your mouth, make a bunch of noises, and you're gonna your mouth is gonna get a feel for what it has to do to make this call make different pitches, different tones. After you do that for a little while, then move on to just the quack. The quack is gonna be the single note that's gonna make up most of your cadences, probably 80% or more of your calling. You want to kind of master that quack before you go any further. And for me, I say the word quit because I learned by watching old Buck Gardner videos, and that's what he used to say is quit. Some people say quack. Some people say other things that are similar to like that. It doesn't matter what you say. What matters is that it's something similar to a quack, and it needs to have an end, because ducks don't just go like quack, 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 quack. their quacks do have an end. So it's like quit, 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 quit. That's why I say quit, or some people say quack, but they'll say some word that does have a hard end that'll be pronounced into your call. Now I talked about how you hold it to your mouth, but I did not talk about yet how you blow into it. And really you don't blow into a duck call, you kind of talk into a duck call. If you find yourself puffing your cheeks, you're doing it wrong. You should never puff your cheeks when blowing into a duck call, because you're, again, not blowing into it. You are basically talking into this, sending air from your diaphragm. So if you can imagine like a quarterback coming up to a line of scrimmage and going, hut, hut, hoik, right? That's a little bit different than talking, really projecting voice. That sounds coming from your diaphragm. That's how you want to blow into these duck calls. So blowing duck calls, if you do it for a long time, it is an ab workout. You will feel it in your abs because you're using your diaphragm so much. But here's what it sounds like when I do quack, and again I'm saying quit into the call with my diaphragm, and I'm going to blow first into the back of the call so you can just hear what this air sounds like, and then I'll blow it into the front of the call. Now that's just the air coming through. Now let me flip it around and blow through the barrel instead of the insert, that same exact thing. And I gotta warn you, if you're wearing headphones or if you have your computer's volume turned up, you might get a little startled, or if you have animals in the nearby vicinity, they might go a little bit crazy, because we're about to blow some calls here, people. And again, you just want to make quacks until you're blue in the face, until you feel like you've made quacks that really sound like ducks, you know, something that really is good enough to fool you. Then you're in good shape. And I would master those quacks before you go into any sequence of quacks. And I would do both of those things before getting into the feeding calls. Feeding calls are really more, they sound better for people than they do for ducks. Yeah, ducks do it, but it's not essential for calling ducks at all. All right, the greeting call. So this is the very basic how you doing call. This is going to be the call you use more than anything else. And this is the typical one that you hear. If there's a hen mallard or a hen of most of these puddle ducks, they sound very similar. They'll have a series of quacks that are just like this. It'll be 5 to 7 notes, and it'll kind of slowly taper off. You know, it starts off kind of strong, and then it kind of slowly tapers off. So let me go ahead and give an example of just a common greeting call. This should try to sound very much like a duck. So we've all heard ducks sitting there. We don't want to do anything that a duck can't do. So 5 to 7 notes. We don't have to be super loud with this. This isn't a hail call. But one variation of this that a lot of people like to throw in is called kind of the lonesome hen greeting call. And this is just a drawn out variation that's a little bit more pleading. And, you know, for pressured birds or birds late in the season, it might be that little different thing that gets the birds looking at you a little bit. And here I'll give you an example. And it's just, notice how the first, and remember I say quit, you could also say quack, but I'm going to really kind of draw it out. So a little bit different. If the normal greeting call is then your lonesome hen just a little bit more drawn out, really pleading that duck to come in. Just almost like a slow. Think of it like your quacking cadence with a southern draw. Okay, our next one, I mentioned this before. Now, this is going to be the hail call. So, this is when ducks are far off. We never want to do this when ducks are within, 150 yards or so. On a calm day, even further than that, out to 200, you want to make sure that these ducks are far off when you do this, because you're basically doing something that a duck can't do. You're going to be max volume on your call. And you're going to probably do 7, 9, 10, 12 notes, something that a duck just can't do. Their lungs don't have that much air. So, again, not realistic, but this is when you're really trying to reach a duck a far ways off that maybe could just barely hear you, but can't really hear what's going on. That's the one you're calling at with the hail call. So somewhere between 150 to 300 yards, maybe a little bit further than that. And anything further than that is basically, I'm not calling at them. I'm not somebody who just sits there and blind calls. I like to see the duck that I'm calling at. And I like to do, like Buck Gardner says, calling on the corners. So only call when you can see that the duck is not flying right at you. Like you see this canvasback drake coming right into us. This is a good example of where I would not call hardly at all. Maybe a little bit of feeding chuckle, maybe a little bit of whistle. But when the duck's coming in like that, when he's locked up, coming straight towards you, he's already doing what you want. All you can do is mess it up by giving up your location. Let him come. So mainly when I'm calling is, again, Buck Gardner calls it calling the corners. Only call that duck when you can see the wingtips and the tail feathers, meaning that it's flying at an angle or a slant where it's not coming straight at you. Because if it is coming straight at you, not only is it already doing what you want, but it's also much more likely to pinpoint exactly where you were calling from, which could be game over. But here's an example of the hail call. Again, these ducks are way, way out there, and I'm going to try to do this without making my dog, who's in the other room, go absolutely crazy, but no promises. We'll see what happens. So hopefully I didn't blow out everybody's eardrums there. My dog's not barking, so hey, that's victory. Hopefully everybody can still hear. That's the loudest call, so don't worry. Nothing else will be that loud again. Now, the comeback call, okay? So this call is just going to be a quicker, more aggressive call. And this one is one that I really like to use when the ducks are they feel like they're somewhat interested, but they're also looking at other spots, right? So this is when you really got to tell them, no, this is the hole you want to be in, not that one over there, not that one over there, right here, come in this hole. And you want to go ahead and do an urgent, more pleading style call that's got shorter quacks in it, so it'll sound more like this. And I'll even get more emphatic than that if I see the ducks about to land. Let's see, the ducks are skirting your decoys and they're about to land, 150 yards away or whatever it is, out of range. I'll really get on them, and sometimes that'll be enough to be like, oh, this duck's trying to tell me not to land here, and they'll come back and give me one more look. So if they start to land, then I'll almost get hail call-y with it. So I'm still doing a comeback call, but almost as emphatic as I can into here, just making them raise up from where they're trying to land. And that will sound something like this. So really just pleading with them like, don't go over there. That's a bad choice. Bad choice. Okay, and now we can finally get to the feeding calls. Talk about them again. these are not absolutely necessary. You don't have to have a good feeding call to go out and be a very good duck hunter, duck caller. But this does help to add a little bit of depth to your calling. And if nothing else, it makes you sound a little bit more cool to the other people in your blind and the other waterfowl hunters around you. Um, I downplay it for ducks, but it is a good way to call quietly when you've got ducks that are maybe working from a lot of different ways. You can't necessarily watch exactly which duck is working because maybe you've got them coming from multiple different angles. Doing some quiet call like a feeding call might be a good way to help kind of disguise where you are but still make some ducky sounds. And for me, I say the word ticka ticka or tick tick tuk tuk is what I say into the call. Now some people say digga 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 or anything that sounds similar to like that. The exact words you say are not important. Whatever you say that sounds like that and you stick with, it is going to work. Basically, you have to get to where you can say whatever phrase this is as fast as possible. And I used to be such a nerd, I guess, back in high school. I would just be sitting there in class being like ticka 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 ticka, practicing that without a call, just saying that under my breath so that I could get faster doing my feeding calls. So anyway, you could do the same thing with or without a call. Just practicing saying your cadence will get you faster at your feeding call. Now, once you actually add the call to your mouth, this is what it sounds like. And I'm going to start off with a slow feeding call. And for that, I'll say tuk tuk or tick tick. And then I'll get into the little bit faster kind of machine gun style call. And that's where I'm actually saying ticka 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 ticka. Drag it out every once in a while to sound like a quack. And this is what it sounds like. So that's kind of an example of feeding calls. Then when you add it all together with some cadence of quack and mix in some feeding calls, just for an example, what all that might sound like when ducks are working, I'll put them all together. So that is 99.9% of all the notes that you really need to use when calling in ducks. The other call that we'll mention are these specialty calls, whistles. Again, are these things imperative to have? No, they're not. Even if you are planning to hunt a species that the calls are made for, like widgeon, pintail, teal, you don't have to have the whistle. But that being said, hey, they're fun to play with. And like I mentioned before, people that might be new to hunting or kids, this is a great thing to give it to a kid or a new hunter. Let them play with it. There's almost no way that they can blow it in a way that's going to mess up your hunt, but they can feel like they played a part in the calling. So the 6-in-1, they say they'll do 6 different whistles. You can also buy really nice calls that are made to do any one of the species, and those calls generally sound better than the 6-in-1. I do have the 6-in-1 here. I'll just show you what it sounds like. Here's kind of a mallard drake. A teal peep. You can kind of do a widgeon. You can kind of do, let's see, a wood duck. A lot of you have heard wood ducks, right? So right at first shooting light, and usually right at shooting time is ending, the woodies like to fly. You hear those whistles, get ready. All right, now let's move into some duck decoys. Okay, duck decoys. These are always fun. I mean, they're pretty. Ducks are colorful. Decoys are like toys. You know, this is always a fun thing to get. But these things are both bulky and expensive. So don't feel like if you're getting into waterfowl hunting, oh man, I've got to have 6 dozen of the best decoys from the start. You don't have to. No. I Most of my hunts, I would say most of my good hunts in the history of my life have been with 4 dozen or less decoys. And a lot of them with 2 dozen or less decoys. So more decoys is not always the right answer. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but you kind of want to match the area that you're hunting, right? So if you are hunting a huge lake, you might need a bigger decoy spread to attract the duck's attention than hunting a small marsh. Um, Mallard decoys do work for everything. So people ask us, do I need to get specific teal decoys for teal season? Or do I need, if I don't get pintail decoys, am I never going to get a pintail? It's not quite like that. Remember, ducks see these decoys differently than we do. So even though all these decoys look like mallards to us, they may not exactly look like mallards or to other ducks. And I think that's important to point out because I think a lot of this needing to get different species is overblown. Now, I have different species of decoys myself, and I have it more for myself than I do for ducks. I'm sure they do look differently to ducks, so it's probably good to have a little diversity in your spread, but I highly doubt any of them look exactly like ducks like they do to us, just because we see things a little bit differently. You will find decoys that are supposedly UV painted to match what ducks see. Those might be good. The only thing I'll say about that is until I see videos of birds of prey like bald eagles or peregrine falcons attacking a decoy, I'm not going to believe that it looks exactly like a duck. Because I've seen a ton of times where you watch hunting shows and people are hunting over a whole bunch of decoys that look awesome to us. They shoot a duck and here comes an eagle or a falcon and they pick up the duck. They've never touched the decoys the whole time. So anyway, well, once an eagle starts carrying away decoys, I'm gonna start buying them. I'll tell you that. Now, decoy bags. These are just as important as the decoys themselves if you are walking in. Now, if you have a nice boat, hey, you can just throw all your decoys in there. You may not be organized, but you can get the job done. But if you are, like when I started out, I didn't have a boat walking in to everywhere I would hunt. You've got to have a good quality decoy bag with good quality straps. That's the same as like when you're getting your really lightweight backpacking bow hunting stand. You want good straps on that thing. You want it to be lightweight. Well, we can't really make the decoys much more lightweight than they are, so 2 dozen decoys on your back gets heavy really, really quick. And each one of those has a 3 to 5 ounce weight on them, and then, of course, after a day in the marsh, they're all wet and even heavier. And I can't tell you how many straps I've broken out in the marsh on decoy bags. And you think getting the decoy bag out sucks when you've got 2 working straps. Just try that with 1 strap. That is no fun. I still remember, a decade ago, remember pulling decoy bags out of the marsh with only 1 strap, and remember that struggle. It's worse than dragging a deer out, in my opinion. Now, for our placement considerations, really wind direction is the trump suit, okay? So wind direction is more important than anything else. Birds land and take off into the wind. And this is one of the reasons why hunting with no wind is really, really hard, because birds can work from absolutely any direction. It's also really hard to make your decoys look realistic, but even if they do look realistic, they can work from any direction, makes it really tough to work out. Your secondary consideration is the sun, and this is mainly for you to be able to see and also for the ducks to not be able to see you. Presumably, you should be hiding in the shadows, and so if the ducks are coming into you straight into the sun, that makes it way, way easier to hide. If you're in the shadows, oh man, like kudos. I already talked about how the hide is the number one most important thing other than location, and that's how you really hide from ducks. Get into the shadows, get the sun in their face but at your back, and as a benefit then you get to see all the pretty colorful ducks in front of you. You really get to pick out drakes, or it's a lot easier to pick out species of bonus ducks once you do get your mallards, if you do. After that, match your hunting area. If you're hunting in a small little area like this guy in this picture, and you brought 10 dozen decoys, you probably can't fit 10 dozen decoys out in that pocket. And if you did, there may not be a spot hardly for another duck to land, so it would probably not be a good idea. Always have a landing zone or a pocket. And then your last consideration is just the rigging on your decoys. How much cord do you have on there and the weight? If you're hunting moving water, you're going to need more weight to keep those decoys still. You don't want to throw out a decoy with a 3-ounce weight into a river that's moving fast, and then that anchor doesn't work and your decoy just floats off. That's a lot of people lose decoys that way. Now, when the area is pressured, you want to stand out. And so some people will try to really max their decoy spread out in those circumstances. Me, I tend to go the other way. When I'm hunting pressured birds, maybe I try to limit my decoy spread. And always check your area-specific regulations. There are some areas that require you to have at least 6 decoys or a dozen decoys. So you do have to adhere by any of those minimums that are there, but I've definitely had times in areas that don't have those limits where I've went down to just 2 or 3 decoys, and it's worked out well for me because I've looked different than all the other groups of hunters out there that all had 2 to 4 dozen decoys with 1 to 2 spinners out there. I could cut down to 2 to 3 and look more realistic and get ducks that way. The wind, very important. Not only does it give you a bunch of motion all over the water, it helps disguise your movement on the bank. It also gives you, you know exactly which way the ducks are going to work. You know they're going to work into the wind when the wind's blowing every time. And I like to think of decoys as blockers, not attractors. So it's common, everybody thinks of decoys as attractors, throw them out, and that's where the ducks want to land. And like I mentioned before, ducks see a little bit differently than we do. So they see decoys on the water. Hey, there's ducks on the water, there must be food over there, so they fly in that general direction. But my experience in the Midwest, and I've done most of my hunting in Missouri, which is the same basically latitude as Illinois. These ducks have been hunted to the north of us. They're not coming in here naive. Generally, they all have a little bit of streetwise to them once we get a crack at them. And so I believe decoys bring them in, but once they're within range, if they're 30 to 40 yards straight above a decoy, they will flare from a decoy just like they do from a boat or from seeing a hunter. I've seen it enough times to know that's one of the reasons why I don't think decoys look exactly perfect to them, because they do get too close to them, they tend to flare. Some things that help with that, I think, are flocking or cork decoys, or basically any decoy that's not a flat piece of plastic. The more texture you have in your decoy, I think the better it is. Now that's just my personal opinion, but I think having some texture in there makes the decoys look a little bit better to ducks. But still, I treat them as blockers, and that's why I like to have not only a big open pocket for them to land in, but I try to give them a decoy-free approach so they've got nothing to fly over that might potentially flare them. So let's get right into a scenario here. This is your basic U or J-shaped duck decoy spread. This is what people use a lot of times. Now, sometimes you might turn this just into two ovals and not put the decoys right out in front of you. That's a little variation on it, but basically the idea is you have ducks on both sides that are going to funnel the incoming ducks right into your landing zone and in a good shooting range for you. So a lot of times, and this is one of the reasons why I like to have multiple species of decoys, if most of my decoys are mallards out there, I'll take, let's say, a pintail or a widgeon or some off-species decoy, and I'll try to put it out at the edge of my decoy spread right at about 35 or 40 yards, and that gives me a quick thing to look at and be able to judge distances from the blind. Like, okay, I know those pintails are at 40 yards, so anytime I've got ducks within that, they're in range. Anytime ducks are beyond that, they're out of range. That can really be helpful, because on open water it can be super tricky, especially for new hunters, to judge the range of when to shoot and when not to shoot. I like using landmarks on the bird itself, like when you can clearly see the eye or clearly see the feet, clearly see the bill, any of those things, then it's probably within 40 yards, but that's a little bit different for everybody's eyes. So you'll kind of have to get that own sight picture on yourself when you're starting out. Use those off-species duck decoys out there at about 35 or 40 yards to help you narrow down that distance, because shooting at ducks outside of range, that's what we call sky busting, and that is not only a good way to really ruin your hunt, but also everybody's hunt around you, because sky busted birds, they tend to not, they've been educated. They're not coming into any more decoy spreads, spinning wing decoys, like you've just given them a full-on lesson. It's kind of like when a deer blows at you. So try to only take shots when ducks are in good working range. But here we've got the wind directly at their back. And if these guys are lucky, the sun is directly at their back too. That's the perfect scenario. If you've got a spot you can work where the wind and the sun is directly at your back, you've got everything working in your favor. And a decoy spread like this works out just perfect. You see how those three ducks coming in, the orange ones, they don't have to fly over any decoys, but they have the comfort of having those decoys on both sides. So they feel like this is a good spot to loaf, a good safe spot to feed, but nothing, hopefully, is going to flare them before they get right in your face. Now, okay, let's say we've got a crosswind. Maybe they did this so the sun could still be at their back, or maybe they just had to do the crosswind because this is the way the water body was kind of situated, so they needed to hunt this way. No problem with a crosswind at all. Just flip your U or your J so that you collect the ducks this way. The ducks are still going to be landing into the wind, but now they're going to land hopefully right in the middle of that pocket out there. So for this way, you might have your U extending out 50 yards into the water or so, and you know that if any ducks land on the far side of it, they're out of range, don't even fire at it. But any ducks that actually come into your U, they're good to go. And if I was hunting under this circumstance and maybe ducks weren't finishing real well, one thing that I might do is remove some of those decoys that are right down there by the blind that the ducks are flying right into when they're landing. I would pull some of those out and see if that might help them to finish. Now, for divers, and this could be for any ducks, but this is a typical way that people hunt divers, is you just find your pond, your lake, your water body, and you just get on a point. So it doesn't matter exactly what the water conditions are around you, because this is not so much a feeding spot as it is just a loafing location, and a point is a good place to intercept these passing divers that are just kind of flying around the lake. So points are good places to collect them, and then you're basically just setting up your J shape into there to go ahead and collect the ducks as they come by. Now here for just a little bit of a different variation here. So I talked about when they're pressured, one thing that I might do is go ahead and reduce my number of decoys. Another thing you might do is go ahead and change your orientation of decoys a little bit so that they are in kind of obvious flocks or family groups. So you could have a group or two or three here, and then you go a little ways and have a group or two or three there, and keep doing that so they all look like they're these individual family groups. Sometimes that's enough just to look a little bit different than everybody else out there, and the ducks are like, yeah, this looks like a natural spot, I'll go into this, and little do they know that's where you're hiding. So now let's look at an actual picture. So this is just a picture I pulled off the web. But let's say you were hunting on this pond or lake, whatever it might be. Here's one of those points that you could set up on. Right where that star is, that's where I'd put my layout blinds. And notice how there's not a bunch of vegetation there. So you probably would need some layout blinds or something to get hidden there. Now that's not super important for diver ducks. You could maybe just lie on the bank in camo and be fine for them. But for mallards or some of the puddle ducks that you can also get in these circumstances, you would really want some more camo. So a layout blind would be your friend there. Plus, they're really comfy to hunt out of. So I do highly recommend the layout blinds for waterfowl hunters out there. But I would potentially set up my decoys in these two sort of red maroon ovals that I've got on there. I would just scatter decoys all over those. And this is kind of a big lake, so I would probably bring as many decoys as I could carry that I had. So if that was 4, 5, 6 dozen, I would bring them all, and I would split them on both of those sides. Now, if I had any motion decoys, like let's say a spinning wing decoy, I generally like to put that beyond where the ducks will land. So I should have marked it here on the map, but I would probably put the spinning wing decoy all the way on the end of that top left oval, so that the ducks coming into that wind, they would see it in the distance, but would hopefully land before they got to it. Now, a typical marsh setup. Now, here you see that we are looking into the wind, but this is, are not looking into the wind. We're looking into the sun, right? The sun is rising and it's coming right into our face, but look at the wind. The wind is going this way. So that where that star is, that is a good place for us to set up. And in this circumstance, I might go ahead and put my decoys out in all three of these different locations, and as a way to hopefully funnel ducks into that location of open water right in front of that star for a good shot. So the ducks could work it a couple different ways here. They could come into this pool. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but they could come into this pool to the left-hand side of all these decoys. But my guess is most of the birds would want to work right in here out in front of your star, if you can see my cursor, between these two smaller polygons of decoys. Now, with the sun in your eyes, it would be harder to see and ID the birds, so you may miss some shots, but the wind is the most important factor, even more important than the sun. Now, movement is very important, and my favorite way to add movement is the oldest school way, is the old school jerk rig. Now, we have all kinds of motorized decoys these days, but nothing, in my opinion, matches the lifelike movement as a jerk rig. And the best thing about jerk rigs is you can go buy them already made from the store, where all you got to do is clip decoys to them, or you could make this with stuff you probably have around your shop without having to get anything. So that's the nice thing about these setups. It's just basically a string that goes out and it's attached to a heavy weight at the end of it. Usually there's a bit of surgical tubing or something that's springy, so that you can get the forward and back action, and then you connect a number of decoys to that string, either directly or to a spreader bar, and then to the string. And every time you pull that string, the decoys move, and then that rubber tubing attached to the weight pulls them back. And then you do it again, and that moves all the water in your decoy spread, can really look lifelike, and can really, really draw the birds in. Now, spinning wing decoys, most people have these now. When they first came out, they were super effective. They're not, it's not like they're not quite as effective these days as they were then. You know, ducks do get wise to them, and there are certain times where spinning wing decoys are a detriment. I've definitely seen times where we've had a spinning wing decoy or two out and we've not had success. Ducks weren't finishing. We pulled those and then we did better. So that may be the case. But for new birds, and especially on sunny days, sunny, windy days where ducks can see that flash a long ways, I think they do help, especially with new birds, because they're looking for places where birds are landing. Like, where's the food at? Where's the safe spots at? Some of those days can be really awesome hunting, and some people will put out 3, 4, 5, 6 of these things, and they look awesome. I've never had more than one myself, and a lot of times I'll hunt with people that have one too. So maybe we've got two out, and that's plenty. You know, if you have more than that, awesome. But if you get one or two out there, you're probably in good shape. And just keep in mind, if your birds are not finishing, try turning the thing off and see what happens. And I will say my favorite mode on the spinning wing decoys is the intermittent mode. So it's on a little bit, off a little bit, on a little bit, off a little bit. To me, that's the most realistic. Having a remote and turning them off and on is also good, but then you got to have somebody be on that remote all the time, and that's tough to do when you're watching ducks that are working and coming in, and those remotes, sometimes there's a delay. So I usually just set it to the intermittent on off and let them go. Now, there's all sorts of other motion decoys. Some of them are wobblers. Some of them will kick their legs. Some of them tip their head under the water. Some of them splash all around. Basically, hey, on calm days, some motion is better than nothing. So any of these things might be good. I will say most of these decoys that I've ever bought in my life, I've been disappointed, because if there's even the slightest amount of wind, which most of the time when we're hunting when it's decent there is, they don't do too much. Because you see, like this decoy in this picture here, sure, it's making some great ripples, but you know what would also make those same ripples? About a 7 mile per hour wind. So if you've got wind like that, a lot of these things maybe are overkill. They're not going to really add too much motion to what you have. Now, the jerk rig, yeah, you can really make a big commotion on the water with those things, but a lot of these battery powered motion decoys just don't do enough of a disturbance that to me is not really worth it, unless, if like I said, you are hunting on a really calm day. It might be the one thing that brings birds in when otherwise they're skittish. That's about the only time. With that, we do have Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of unique webinars now at this point, all for free, available on YouTube, all Illinois specific. So whether you're into hunting waterfowl, squirrels, rabbits, raccoons, trapping, deer, turkeys, whatever it might be, we've got something that can hopefully help you out this fall, winter, and it's all right there on YouTube for free. Also, feel free to follow us on the socials, Facebook and Instagram. We give a lot of reminders about season dates, about lotteries, and about the different events that we have on those. So definitely a good idea to follow us there, and of course we appreciate that. And with that, I will turn it over to any questions, comments, complaints.
We also just updated our Eventbrite as well, so we have a whole bunch more webinars coming up in the next few weeks too.
And some more coming. We still got a few more to post.
Yep. Yeah. couple workshops. What do you recommend for chokes?
Yeah, and that's really going to depend on the type of water you're hunting and everything. Because, like, let's just say, for example, teal season. I've had a lot of teal season where I've wanted a skeet choke. Usually I'm rocking maybe improved cylinder or modified, but a lot of times teal right in your face. You might want the most open choke you have. Of course, keep in mind with steel, you never want to use anything like full or above. Not recommended. Don't do that. But I'm 90% of the time I'm rocking modified in my 870, which with steel probably patterns a lot like a full choke tube. So it gives me good range, and it's probably overkill at small ducks at close distances, but I guess I'd rather have that than the other way around for most of duck season. So modified's what I rock most of the time. I know folks that like if you go down and hunt flooded timber, it's the same situation as like teal. The ducks are going to be right in your face, so you may want improved cylinder skeet choke because your furthest shot might be 25 yards, and you might be shooting a lot of ducks at like 12 to 18 yards. So you want that pattern to open up a bit, or the vice versa. If you're hunting out in a picked cornfield that's just so big you can barely see the edges of it, you might have some further shots there. So that might be a time to really go to the modified, or they do make some special steel choke or steel shot specific choke tubes that are maybe a little bit more constricted than modified, like improved modified. And I've got one. I think it's called Hunter Specialties Steel Choke Undertaker or something like that. But it's a special extended choke tube just for steel shot. And to tell you the truth, I feel like it patterns just like my modified, but it's supposed to be maybe a little bit tighter. Maybe I would go to that out in a cornfield, but like I said, modified for me 95% of the times the way to go.
Get another question. When do you time your shots? Are you shooting right as the ducks come into land?
Yeah, so I like to designate one person in the blind as the shot caller. And usually that's whoever is the main caller, because whoever is the main caller needs to kind of be watching the ducks. Not enough that the ducks can see you, but you got to watch them enough so that you know when to call, when not to call, and so that you can call the shots. And for me, I want to wait when if they're working, let them work, but take your shot for me before they hit the water. So I'm going to let them work as close as they're going to come. And then I yell, take them before they hit the water when I think they're as close as they're going to get. Now, if they're not working quite that good, like they're not finishing, then you may have to make that call a little bit sooner. Try to watch the ducks, and when they're circling, okay, they're not quite in range, not quite in range. Okay, now they're in range, but they haven't been working. Once they're in range, I'll call the shot as soon as I think we have our best opportunity to take them before they leave. So again, for me personally, I know when I can see the duck's eye clearly, it's within 40 yards. So I'm really looking for that. And once I can see the duck's eye, then I could take it on any pass, but I'll let them keep coming and coming. If they're coming closer and closer and it looks like they're going to work good, I will let them go until their feet are down. And then, yeah, you'll take them right before they land, and then everybody jumps up and they'll start to fly away. But those are generally really good, high percentage shots to take. I really don't like ducks flying straight away from me because their gizzard is a really hard, dense organ, and it can actually protect most of their vitals. So ducks flying straight away are generally a no-go for me unless if they're really, really close. But any duck side shot or up that I have a clear view of its head, neck, breast within 40 yards, yep, that's my go-to shot. And then if I'm the shot caller, I like to switch between who shoots first. So if we're hunting in a group of 3 to 4, and again, this is different with every hunting party, but I don't personally like the melee where, okay, ducks are in range, take them, and then all 4 people are boom, 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 and ducks fall and nobody knows who got what. That's not my style. And so personally, I like to pick a rotating first shooter. So let's just say if Lauren and I and Dan and Jason were hunting, maybe Lauren was up first. All right, Lauren, your first shot first. So when I call the shot, nobody can shoot before Lauren. And what I find that does is it makes all the hunters be more patient because otherwise they're not only wanting to shoot the ducks or geese, but they're also trying to beat the other people in the blind out there to try to get the best shots, right? And I take away that competition by swapping that first shot out. So after the first shot, then it's anybody's game, right? Everybody's a backup shooter, but nobody can fire before Lauren. And then the next volley, maybe it's Jason. Now you're the first shooter, nobody shoots before you. And then Dan, and then me, and we would keep doing that. And that ensures that one person always gets a good, clean, unobstructed shot. And I think it helps us know who shoots what. It's a better system for me. So that's kind of how I call shots. And again, everybody does it differently. There's no one way to skin a cat. As long as you get the hide off, hey, you're doing good.
And sort of in that vein, but more for calling, somebody wants to know how do you coordinate calling for multiple hunters in a blind so you're working together and not calling over each other?
Same way like a rock band does it, like whoever is the best on the call is generally going to be your primary caller. And then your other people are secondary callers. So you just follow your primary caller's lead, right? If your primary caller starts calling, you just join in, call a little bit quieter, but try to supplement what they're doing. You're not drowning them out, you're just adding some more duck noises to kind of increase the overall just the tone of everything going around. So I don't find it to be a problem because when a bunch of ducks are on the water, they're not being polite. They're all quacking at the same time. You're just hearing quacks and feeding calls and all this kind of stuff all over the place. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Work with your callers. Just keep in mind when the ducks are working, when they're coming in, stop calling. Because the worst thing you can do is the ducks are cupped coming in and you keep calling, and while you're doing that, they pick out, wait a minute, why are these quacks coming from that, brushy area instead of the water where I see these other ducks? Like that can be enough to make them flare. So knowing when not to call is way more important than knowing when to call for sure. So that's the biggest thing is if your main caller stops calling, you need to also stop calling and be very still. And that's why it's easier if there's just one main caller, there's one person that's trying to watch the ducks. Because if you've got 3 or 4 people all trying to turn their head and see the ducks, that's a lot of movement. Those ducks are going to see it. These mallards, they can see as good as turkeys, and a lot of times they're flying in flocks, 15, 20 birds. So you're talking about 40 turkey eyes from a bird's eye view that you have to try to fool in the marsh. Are you kidding me? Like, there's nothing easy about that. So one caller that kind of keeps an eye on the ducks, all of your other hunters are trying to be just as still as if there was a giant buck 60, 70 yards away walking towards you. Like they need to be statue still and be ready to pounce when the take 'em is called. But other than that, you got to make yourself into a blade of grass into the marsh.
All right. We've had no other questions for the last few minutes.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and good luck out in the marsh this fall and winter. Definitely, if you have any questions, even after we leave, send them to us at any time. We at the Illinois Learn to Hunt program, we want to be your resource for the entire hunting, trapping season. There's no silly questions. We like them all, and we know that it is really tough to get going in hunting or trapping out there. So definitely use us as a resource. Ask questions. You can share maps, and we can tell you where we might hunt, where we might not hunt, and share your successes too. We love to hear those things as well. Thanks, everybody. And if you're not waterfowl hunting, it's also time to be deer hunting. So if that's something that interests you, right now is the prime time here over the next couple days of the whole year to be bow hunting. So if you're an archery hunter, what are you doing? Get out in the woods.
I mean, hey, if you want to be in the water, trapping season opens in 6 days. Just
Yeah,
throwing that out there.
it's that time of year. It's like everything that's awesome is going on. It's you got to pick and choose. What are you going to do? You're going to duck hunt. You're going to trap. You're going to archery hunt. You're going to squirrel hunt. You can't do it all. Not in one day, anyway.
All right. Well, if you guys think of any questions, let us know.
Yep. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.